Hi guys, it's Andrew here, back again with another TouchDesigner video. I just wanted to make this really quick intro to talk about what this is, which is a live stream on my Discord server. I gave this as a lecture last week, and it's basically me talking about texture coordinates and some like very specific things about tops and pops that I really enjoy. If you are interested in this, I would love for you to join my Discord server. Link in bio. Yeah, we already have like 600 people, and it's really awesome. I'm hosting workshops there. I also host, like lectures. But you can also just kind of like say hi, ask questions, talk about music, whatever it is. But yeah, hopefully I'll be doing more in the future. I've been really enjoying teaching this past year, and I want to do so much more of it. I really want to teach people how TouchDesigner works on a, I don't know, on like a broader level of like how I do things and what I think, good practices are and mindful practices are in terms of like I guess mathematics and coding and computational art. So yeah, if you're interested, feel free to join. And I hope you enjoy, and I hope you learn something. Bye. Like I said, if you are new to TouchDesigner, welcome. If you're like just starting out, that's really awesome. I really like teaching. I like talking about TouchDesigner and graphics programming, and I think one of the biggest things that I want to do with lecturing and trying out teaching online is to really communicate like this idea of um like TouchDesigner. I feel like when people think about TouchDesigner, they think about the very specific types of visuals, right? Like the blob tracking, the squares, the point cloud particles. But I want to try to, with like any of my educational content, to do two things. Number one is like to, I don't know, celebrate like math, but number two, to tell people that like TouchDesigner is more than just like these like blob tracking visuals. Like you can quite literally make anything in TouchDesigner, and it's really like, I don't know, when you think about like, when I think about like people who do like After Effects or Photoshop, or like, like you don't think of like Photoshop graphics or like After Effects, like an After Effects visual, right? Like you think of like people who use After Effects and like, Photoshop, and they create things that are like really interesting, right? And I think that when I talk to a lot of people who are into TouchDesigner and they ask like, oh, TouchDesigner visual, they have like a very specific idea. But what I really want to kind of like communicate with these like educational materials is that like TouchDesigner is more than that. You can do almost anything and everything in TouchDesigner, and it is basically free. And it's just like more about like like, I don't know, wrangling the UI and like kind of being able to apply your knowledge, the context that you have, towards this software so that you can kind of like make what you want to make. And yeah, a few other things is I want to. Yes, I also do spreadsheets in it. It's awesome. But yeah, a few things that I want to do. First off, shout out to everyone who boosted my server. I like, honestly, like that, like appreciate it a lot, because now that we have 150, like I think more people can do it, and then I can just kind of keep these things like local to my Discord, which will be really fun. And then everyone can join and, I don't know, talk, communicate, share things, blah blah blah, whatever. And second of all, happy birthday, dog lady. Yeah, she today is her birthday, and that's lit. Also, I think she's doing some like music event that's also on Discord, and yeah, she was like making this. If you like check the share channel, there's a really cute dog driving video that she made, which I thought was really awesome. And then also, yeah, there's like a rigging tutorial that he made, which was really fun. That's also in the tutorials channel. Yes, yeah, you should do that. And yeah, okay, but basically, yeah, that's my little first little thing that I wanted to share, is that like, yeah, hopefully everyone can learn and like realize that like TouchDesigner is more than just like some very simple they're not very simple, but just like, you know, it's really the range of things that you can do is really, really advanced. But yeah, so I just wanted to go and I mean, I'm just gonna go into what I've built out so far, and I'm gonna kind of like talk about things. But this is part of what I was like trying to do. But yeah, I'm gonna start very, very simple and just kind of like I don't know, move this here. Okay, so um, the thing that I want to talk about is data storage in TouchDesigner, right? And I think one of the things that TouchDesigner allows you to do, which I think is really fun, is how do we view data, right? How does someone usually view data? I think a lot of people, when they think about data information, how do we store it? A lot of people think about just like, um, was it like tables, like spreadsheets. But that's only one way to sort of do that, right? Everything when you're doing things digitally is like a form of storage, right? And so for me, I think that something that's like really, really cool about TouchDesigner is that you can treat anything and everything um, as like a way of storing information. And like one way that I really like to demonstrate this is simply by doing this like really fun thing, which is I have this top, right? I can bring this into a signal, right? And this is a chop, which are signals and channels, and we can basically crop it and output it as a single channel set. And then this is our information as a signal, right? As like you know like a sound, kind of like a sound wave, but not really. Like it's just a signal. And what else that's like really interesting is that like you can do things in this world, right? You can like play around with stuff here, and I'll get into that later. But then you can also bring it into something else, like here. And this is what we know as like information, right? This is our information, right? This is what we usually think about data. And so what did I do here? I basically, yeah, exactly, right? But basically, like I've just been immediately right in TouchDesign. I have this video, this image, right, of SpongeBob waving, and now I have that same image, but as a table, and I think that that's really, really interesting. Now something that is also really interesting is well, I've just traversed these three different families, and actually I'm gonna traverse one more, which is a pop. I think that if I just do yes, I just do RGB. There we go. So now we have okay. So now what do we have here? Now we have our image, our SpongeBob, our waving SpongeBob, as a video, like or sorry, as like points in 3D space, right? And this is where I think is like the coolest part is that like wow, we basically have two different types of ways of like visualizing this information, right? Like the first way is like this way, and then the second way is like this way, right? Like these are, but they're equivalent. They're like basically equivalent, right? Like this, I haven't changed any. Like I haven't like technically I have not changed anything about this information. Oh, also, if this gets like too, if the workshop gets too full, I can't see the amount of participants. So like if people could let me know. Um, yeah. I don't think this is a bijection. But anyways, regardless. Now the thing is though, right? So the thing is that like what I really like about Tops is that everything, all of the data storage, right? It it is Tops kind of have this like extra bit of information that acts on data storage that doesn't really exist in a lot of other types of data storage, right? Like in a table, for example. And I want to really like demonstrate this by, okay, what if I were to bring this back into from pops to tops, right? Now, immediately, right, there seems to be an issue, right? Even though nothing has changed, right, from this initial set of information, right? from here to here to here to here to here, I don't get my save. It got annihilated. What happened to my little spun, right? And so this is something that's like really interesting about um tops, about textures as storage, that I think is really, really interesting, which is there seems to be this part of of this is um actually I don't even know what a bijection is, so sorry. But yeah, it is equivalent. Except for this like one part, which I guess isn't equivalent. Anyways, not to confuse stuff like that. But like yeah, so there seems to be this one thing, but it is the same data, right? Like here we have 35 by 28, which is 980 pixels. Here we have 980 and 1, which is still 980. And if I were to change this and view it as points, right, we still get this exact same shape, right? Like these are pretty similar. Like these are exactly the same thing. Like so. And yeah, I feel like oh, there are some people that are not in. Okay, let me add them in real quick. Or you know what? I will just give them the live stream link. Oh, or maybe it's not live streaming. Let me see. Da, 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 da. Let's see. Add as workshop. Oh, I should really get someone else to do this while I'm like kind of ranting about this. Added. Awesome. Okay, cool. Anyways, back to what I was saying. Um, okay, yeah. But so clearly, right? We even though it's the exact same information, it's not the exact same information because we've lost this dimensionality of our sponge. And this is what I want to talk about. Like how data storage kind of works on the GPU or like in like texture programming, like graphics programming, where we can use this idea of like shaping our information to make sure that what we do in like with our uh our data can kind of like return back to its original state. And one way to like make sure that the shape is correct is something that I really like to do, which I recently discovered, which is this thing called a dimension. And this basically allows you to set the dimension of your like data in like multiple different ways, but a really good straightforward one is just by setting the length and the width of our image. So this is 35 by 28. So if I were to just go into this dimension plot and I were to just search this, set this to be 30 by 28, like so, I can then bring this into here, use pop dimensions. Is there mic compression? God damn it. How bad is it? Because I'm trying to fix that as well with my OBS, but I don't know. Can you guys? Okay. Is it? Okay. Well, as long as you guys can hear me, then that's good. Okay. So now, why would you want to do this? Well, to be honest, there's not that many reasons why you would want to do this. Like, in particular, I feel like a lot of people when they like, and I'm gonna put this up as like just like a warning, is that this workflow right here leaves the GPU. It goes onto the CPU, which is a lot laggier. And if you're doing things in real time, like you're VJing and stuff like that, that's like honestly not the best thing ever. I luckily don't care about that. I like to make things. I don't really make things in real time. And most of the times when you're doing stuff on chops, like especially here, this is where everything's on the CPU with the green. It like it will be laggier. But let me like demonstrate something that I think is really cool. There are like different types of there are different types of operators that only exist in their like class, right? And although while the limit top exists, like the limit function exists in tops and in chops. If I go into this quantize and I change this quantize position right here, you'll see that like this guy right here, like it does this very specific thing, which it kind of like blurs things out, right? Now, the limit chop also does the exact same thing. And what the thing is though, is that it kind of operates in a different way, right? And like a good way to explain why you might want to bring something into a different family is because you can do stuff in chops and then get that same sponge back, and you can like get this like really cool like little, I don't know, just like different type, like you kind of broaden the ways that you can play around with your information and still be able to go back to like that original state, which I think is really really fun. And yeah, I'll go into another way that like we can talk about this with some other information down the line. But this is just like one very simple way that you can like kind of play around with your data in a different family that you wouldn't be able to if you were to just stay in like the image world, right? And there's a lot of different examples of this, but like overall, right, you kind of want to like, as long as you're able to get that shape, right, you can keep that. Is it still okay? I don't know if this was happening last time. Oh, I think it was happening last time. Let me check this real quick. Microphone sound. Hello. Is this better? Okay. Well, I'm gonna just keep on going. But okay, cool, awesome. Anyways, yeah. So that is my first little thing, right? Is like this like idea of like information not only having like you know like a way to store it, right, or like information as like a list, right, but then also information in terms of like uh uh like a dimension, right? There's like two ways to store this, right? Like there are the pixel values and the RGBA, and then also the way that you can shape it, which I think is really cool. Like otherwise it would just kind of be like this. Yeah, exactly. And now, one of the things that I think is like really, really also cool about tops as like data storage, right? And I'm sure if you're new, if you know about TouchDesigner, this is like something that's like really, really straightforward. But something that I think is really fun is that if I get something like 15 by 3, right? And then I'm just going to click, here's pixels on both of them. Now, something that I think that is like really, really awesome about images as data storage as well, and why this like workflow of like changing, being able to change out of your like current family, is that it will allow like a lot of different things to um like being able to have different visualizations of your like work, like helps a lot when you're dealing with information in different storages. Like having options to be able to see what you're doing is very, very helpful. And one way to do this is like usually, right, when we talk about images, right, when we're talking about images, it's usually 8-bit fixed RGBA, right? And what that means is that, well, when you think about like bringing in an image, right, you are always limited between 0 and 1, right? And when you're limited between 0 and 1, like the reason why is because, well, when you have an image, the pixel values of every single pixel, right, it holds like 4 channels of information: the red channel, the green channel, and the blue channel. And the reason why by default it's kind of like clamped from 0 to 1 is because there's no such thing as, if you have an image, right, there's no such thing as having negative amounts of red or like 200% like blue, right? You can only go to the maximum blue and then like no blue, right? And so the thing is, though, is that TouchDesigner allows you to change the pixel encode. So if I were to multiply this entire data set by 10, right, you'll see that we get a bunch of white pixels. And because we're still in this 8-bit fix encoding, right? All of these, even though we multiplied everything by 10, so like, for example, if we choose this like very bottom left corner right here, right? If we look at this, right? This guy at the bottom left, 0.24, 0.5, 0.89. So if we multiply by 10, this should be around 2.4, 5, and then 9, right? Like 8.9, right? And so the thing is though, is that when we check here, they're all ones. And so, you know, that doesn't make sense mathematically, but it's because we have to change our encoding to be 32-bit folk RGBA. And so now when we look at it, oh, now we are actually multiplying by 2.4. Oh, sorry, we're multiplying by 10. So this is 2.4, 5, and then 9, right? And I really like that about TOPS. But the thing is, I think the reason why I like this about TOPS is because now I can work with data in a way where I'm not reading from a freaking list. All right. I don't like reading things. All right. That hurts my head. I like to look at things. So when I see this, or actually when I see this, this is really informative to me because I know exactly what my information is doing without actually reading. I know like there's like a very relative amount of information where I know that when something is brighter, it's higher. When it's lower, it's like, or when it's lower, it's darker. Now, the thing is though, is that I've been doing TouchDesigner for a really, really long time. So when someone else is looking at this data, like what is this? This is kind of useless to you, right? Like what? Wow, like this pixel and this pixel are the exact same thing. This doesn't correlate. Like this doesn't translate to any really information if I'm just kind of just looking at it like this, right? And so that's why it's nice to have different families of visualizations, because when you are able to do something like that, you can see everything in like, now you have like a better way of like being able to see what's going on, right? Like this is one way, or you know, even if you were, you could literally just swap it into here and also check the values here. Like this is already a great amount of information more. And then especially here where like now you get an entire table, right? But regardless, that was my first little spiel that I wanted to go into about pixel data as storage, or data as an image, right? And like how we can play around with that and like how we can visualize that. It's like really, really versatile in TouchDesigner. And I think that that's really awesome. Now, that's not the main thing that I wanted to talk about. The main thing I wanted to talk about was the other way, right? The other way that we talk about storage, right? Which is that dimensionality, right? Being able to bring that back into a square, right? How do we sort of define length and width in a texture, right? What is our unit of measurement when we're saying this position of the pixel versus this position of the pixel, right? What is that distance? What is differentiating that this pixel is supposed to go here and then this pixel is supposed to go here? Why does our computer know how to organize this information? This information in such a way that we know that there's going to be 35 of these guys here and then 28 here, right? And yeah, I feel like this stumped me for like such a long time in TouchDesigner, and like a big reason was because I was like I kind of just like was like, oh yeah, this just happens, right? But if we grab like, so moving on from this, right? A good way to understand, like I think the best way to understand what is supposed to be happening is using something called a remap, right? And the remap top was such an interesting little guy for me for such a long time because I didn't really understand it. And basically what a remap does is that it allows you to rearrange your pixels in a certain way, depending on the like on a like how do I explain this? The remap allows you to rearrange your pixels given some sort of like ticketing list, right? So imagine like every single pixel, you give it like an ID, like, oh, like one, the first pixel goes here, the second pixel goes here, right? The third pixel goes here. Then it will take the information from here and place that pixel like onto the remap depending on which ticket number it has, essentially. And let me explain this to you guys using something called a ramp. So let's grab our 35 by 35. Kind of, yeah. It's a lookup table for pixel locations, exactly. And so if I were to just make sure that it's 35 by 28, and then do another one, and we call this one a vertical one, and we reorder this like so, and we make this to be 32-bit float RG, and we go here. Now we got this thing. I love this thing. This is what we call a UV map, and it's one of my favorite little guys. And so, what does this guy do exactly? Well, it's kind of similar to the way that images are stored from 0 to 1, but it like color being stored in 0 to 1, but instead it's for pixel location. So if I plug this into here, right, this guy does nothing, right? It does absolutely nothing. And I think that like it's one of those things where it's like, oh, like why does it do nothing, right? And the reason why is because if we look at these IDs, right, like all of these, you can think of these as like ticket positions, right? This is saying the first pixel, or I guess like the 0 0 pixel, the 1 0 pixel, and coordinate systems, right? But essentially these are saying, okay, I'm going to, this position right here is going to essentially look up the 0 0 pixel, which is here, and then it's going to put it right there. And when I figured that out, I was like, wow, that's so interesting. Like, why? Like, I still didn't really understand it, because I was like, oh, what's going on? But like, one way to really see what's happening is if I had to point transform like this, and I were to move my pixels to the side, like so, like moving my x values. And if I just were to put a null here, and kind of look at this as points, right? If I translate this back, like here, right? So it's from negative 0.5, right? Now we have this missing amount of pixels that are just like not there. And the reason why is because so these are what we call, the UV map is basically, these are called texture coordinates. And texture coordinates are similar to color, where there's no such thing as like a negative amount of a texture coordinate and a positive amount of a texture coordinate. Because what we're doing, right, is if I were to actually show you guys what this, these negative values, right, down here for the red, if you see, is basically saying, okay, let's look for the negative part of this image, wherever this location is, and then put a pixel there. But the thing is that there is no negative pixel location. There's only from 0 to 1. And UV maps or texture coordinates are always from 0 to 1. It's always, and this is like kind of the unit of measurement for an image. It's always going to be from 0 to 1. And then what is more specific is like the distance between two texture coordinates that really make it be able to map onto it again. And I am able to talk about, like, I feel like I have a good understanding about this, mainly because I've been working with textures for so long. But I think that dealing with something like this and kind of thinking about it in terms of like, I don't know, like, like these are decimal points, right? These are decimal values, right? And so it's really hard to kind of, for me at least, to like kind of bridge the gap between what, like I'm sure like a lot of you guys are like thinking like, okay, well, how the heck does 0.01426286 and 0.019 correspond to like this like location right here, right? Like it like, to me, that was one of my biggest questions. Like I was like, why the heck does this represent a location. And what happens if I change the size of this guy, right? What if it wasn't 35 by 28? What is the formula to make sure that every single time I'm able to get the right UV map so that I can completely like recreate this image using like a UV map, right? And so like at first I was like, oh, like, well, maybe I can like add noise, right? And then adding noise does that same little like weird thing. Wow, I'm just shredding this guy up, right? But adding noise does that same thing where you get these empty spaces because some of these pixel values, again, they're over the 0 to 1, right? So like for this area right here, you see that we have values that are greater than 1 in the red and the green. And so all of these pixels are asking, okay, well, from this original image, what pixel is at this location, 1.3573 and like 1.1043? Well, there isn't, right? That doesn't exist. So it's going to fill it up with nothing. There are ways that you can fix that by doing a repeat or a mirror, right? There's wrapping in TouchDesigner for these remap things. You can fold it as well. But for this example, like, you know, it's mainly just to be like, okay, yeah, these don't actually exist. Now, when I understood that, I was like, okay, well, how do I actually build like a formula for this? And so I went into something that was much, much better, which was this guy right here, which is these are ramp samples. Okay. And so what did I do? So I was like, okay, well, if I know that this remap tool, that's a great question. Let's select everything. So the thing is that 32, this is already 32 RG, right? But this guy right here, if we use 32-bit RG as well, it doesn't make the values over that value. Like, even if I make this 32-bit float RGBA, it doesn't fix anything because 32-bit float RGBA is talking about the actual value that position, that pixel position is holding. That can be greater than 0 and greater than 1. But that absolute pixel location has to stay between 0 and 1. So even if we were to increase the pixel encoding to be like, oh, we can take all ranges of information, it does not change the fact that this like pixel right here is like just on that location. Like it's only confined. Yeah, you can extend. Yeah, I mentioned that earlier. Yeah, you can change the extend mode, and that, but that's like that's like fine. Like that's just, that doesn't help us for like reconstructing our image essentially. But yeah. And so what I did, right, is like, okay, well, to me, it seems like what we're doing, right, is when we're recreating this image from a texture coordinate, right, from a UV map, essentially what I'm saying, right, is somehow this information, right, holds information about this being the 0th pixel, this one being the 0th 1 pixel, blah, blah, blah. All of these have IDs, right? So I was like, okay, well, why don't I recreate the ID itself? So if I grab a pattern chop, right? What I can do, I was thinking, okay, well, what if you like focus on this X and Y here, right, of these pixel coordinates, you'll see that we get these indices for our pixel locations. So this pixel right here that I'm hovering is 25. Oh, like, yeah, it's the 20. It's the 25th pixel and the 0th pixel, right? And so I was like, okay, well then what if I were to make that with ramp samples? Ramp samples are cool. They're a pretty good way to make like indexes, because what it does is it starts from 0 and it goes to 1,000 in both the index and the value. So if I know that this is 35, what I can do is I can change this pattern to be an X, right? X index or whatever, right? And then I can go into here and I can change this to be 35. And then I can make another one. And I can say that this one is Y. And I'm going to say that this one is 28. And so now I've made two ramps that correspond to the amount of X indexes I have and the amount of Y indexes I have. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this into tops, like so. And I'm just going to crop these, and I'm going to rebuild my UV, but instead of it being those texture coordinates with that ramp, I'm going to use actual indexes. And to be like, to try to understand why this is going on, right? So if this is 35, then I have to crop this to be 28. And then I need to do the same thing with this guy, but this needs to be, because this is 28, I need to crop this to be 35. And so once I do that, I can flip it, and then I can reorder it, and then I can go into the 32 float arg, and then set the second input here. And now, whoop, wait, hold on. What did I do here? Let's see. Oh. Oh, I didn't flip it. Whoopsies. There we go. Lol. Okay, great. So now, yeah, so just, fractions. Yeah. So basically what I did with the crop is that it just repeats everything so that it's 35 by 28. And then this one, so this is like me making two textures that are 35 by 28, similar to the ramp. And then I have this guy right here, which will essentially allow me to recreate a nice little indexing for nice little indexing for my actual original image. And now, actually, I'm gonna copy this and then I'm gonna go back a bunch. Just give me 1 second. Okay. So now, so I know I have this one that I would just call it UV texture, right? And the reason why I did this was because, again, right, I feel like, to me, when I was like trying to learn how this works, it didn't make sense to me why these values were, right? I know, to me, what's happening visually is that this is, again, the 0, 0 pixel, and it's gonna put it there. And then maybe this one right here is the 34th 0 pixel, right? Oh, like there, right? And so I was like, okay, well, maybe I can convert this image, right, this texture, back into this. And I was like, okay, well, how can I do that? Well, what if I were to just grab a math and divide by the lengths, right? I was like, okay, well, if my x is 35 long, why don't I just divide by 35? And then I'm gonna have to mask my green because I only want to divide my red. And then I'm gonna do it again. But I'm also going to divide, well, what is it, 28 by 20, right? And so this is like kind of like normalizing it. Oh, there we go. This is like kind of normalizing it, almost. Because it's not normalizing it, because normalizing we would have to divide by 34 because this index goes from 0 to 34. But it's the same concept. I'm like, okay, I have 35 pixels. Why don't I divide by 35 and then see what happens? And so when I do that, right, when I divide by the pixel width and the height, right, I get this thing that looks basically identical. So I was like, oh my god, wow, there we go. We've cracked the code. We've figured it out, right? But the thing is that when I plug that in, it's not it's not the same, right? It's not the same as my original sponge. My original sponge is still it when I use this indexed version where I can clearly see what's going on with all of these different values. It it it's not the same. There's something off about it. And I was like, okay, well, maybe there's a few reasons. One of the biggest reasons when you're working with textures as a form of storage in TouchDesigner, one of the biggest things is to always make sure that your input smoothness and your viewer smoothness are, well, mainly your input smoothness, but viewer smoothness is good too. Make sure that these are always nearest pixels. Because they're images, by default, this interpolation effect is always on, because most images benefit from interpolation because that like smoothness. You can put it on by default, but I don't like doing that. But yes, it can be a time saver. I feel like for me, when I am working in TouchDesigner, I like to balance between images because it's the same thing where I'm like, ah, shit, like I've now my pixel data is automatically nearest pixels, but then my images aren't nearest pixels, so then I have to change my images to be not nearest pixels. So I think I'd rather do nearest pixels for my pixel data rather than my actual like images. But yeah, I think in the settings, if you go into, where is it, preferences, you can go into tops, and yeah, you can, this will just give you the, oh shit, oh my god, okay, no, sorry, yeah, yeah, you can go down to here and it will do defaults for you, which I think is really great. Yeah, so the difference between these two is that when we're on like interpolate pixels, what's happening is the data is being smoothed out essentially, right? When you have, like, for example, right, if I were to have like a small image, by default things are interpolated because when things are interpolated, they look nicer to the eye. But as a form of, so that's why by default a lot of these things will be interpolated. Now, so like here, right, this, it's very low res, but the interpolation kind of helps make it, I don't know, to me look more like a very smooth image, right? And that's great for an image. But when you change it to nearest pixel, that you get the actual absolute borders. And not only that, but when you're dealing with some operations, there's also an input smoothness. And that will also smooth the actual like values that are going in. So, when these are not when these are interpolated, a value that's like here might not actually be the correct value because that smoothness is making it look better to the eye. So it might be less, it might be higher, so that our eyes will view it better. But when we're using images as data storage, we don't want anything to be smoothed out, right? Imagine you're like, working with geographic data, right? And you're like putting a player like on one part of a field, right? If you were to smooth out that data, that player might move into like a mountain or something, like you want very absolute values so that it will just constrain to that, and nothing will sort of go haywire. Now, for something like remap, this is really important. And this guy right here, like if I just keep it on interpolate pixels, I was like, okay, I bring this into here. I'm like, oh shoot, there's this stuff right here. So I was like, okay, well, what if I turn things into nearest pixels? And I'm like, okay, well, that kind of fixes it. But again, I don't know. This still kind of looks different, And one good way that I really like to check whether or not something is different is by using a difference top. And you see immediately, then there's something wrong here, right? If I were to just use this original remap, my differences are all 0. But when I use this special indexed one that I created myself, oh, there's so much different going on here. it is a very cool effect. And so I was like, okay, well, that doesn't work. And I was like, wait, why? Well, why does that happen? Like, why the heck is this not the same, right? And so I like go into here, and I actually compare these values together. And so, yeah, so I like actually go into these values, and I'm like, oh, whoop, these are still kind of off, right? This one this one we have 0.9857, and then this one we have 0.7143. And I was like, okay, well, then why don't I try to apply oh, yeah, it's just a reorder. This reorder helps a lot. I'm sure these are fine. Yeah, these are fine. And so I was like, okay, well then why don't I apply this difference to here? And so now I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. Wait, give me 1 second. Let me put these in nearest pixels. 1 second. Let me just double check that I have everything correct here. Okay, yeah, this is fine. So if I multiply this with 10, like so. Oh, wait, what's going on here? Oh, I did not change this. This should be 28. There we go. Wait, what? Oh no, this should be fine. This is 128? Yeah, this is 28. Yeah. Wait a second. Why is it doing this? Hmm. Hmm. Why is this a different texture for this? Wait, hold on. Give me 1 second. Sorry, guys. Yeah, this should be the same. Why is this not the same? 35 by 28. And this one's also 35 by 28. Hmm. Hmm. Is it this guy? Oh, yeah, it is. Interesting. Okay, I'm gonna just repurpose this guy. Something's wrong with my actual UV texture when I remade it. Okay. Oh, well. Okay, there we go. Sorry, I don't know what just happened. I'm not sure why that did that thing. But regardless, um, let's see. Yeah, okay, now we're fine. Okay, so anyway, sorry for the roundabout live debug sesh, but yeah. So I was checking why this remap was not working, and I used this difference here. And I was like, okay, well, what happens if I use this difference here? And when I use the difference between the original UV map texture that is created by simply using two ramps, I'm like, oh, there seems to be like this constant value over here where it's just um it's completely like all of them have the same difference. So I was like, okay, well, why don't I just subtract everything from here or add it and see what happens? What if I just close this distance here? And if I do something like that, well, then what is that actual value? Well, if I look at this right here, 1 divided by 35, and this is like something that's really, really crazy to me, was that 1 divided by 35 is exactly like this value right here is the exact half or basically almost, yeah, the exact half of this. So I was like, okay, well, why don't I just drag this guy over here on and then subtract by half of it. Oh, sorry, add, my bad. And then so wow, now all of that goes to almost 0. And then like this is like what? Like this is like 0.00009. And I was like, okay, well that's pretty close to basically nothing. And then what if I go into this one and I do the exact same thing, which is also like that. And so now I've completely closed this gap between the two different UV textures. And when I do this remap now, they're the exact same thing. And I was like, oh, that's so crazy to me. Like, why is that happening? And again, if I do this, it's the exact same thing. This little like index maker that I created is finally representative of this like UV map that I've always been like kind of recreating with like no like actual idea of like what's going on. And yeah, exactly, right? Where is this like difference in value coming from, right? Like where like that was like I was like, why is that happening? Like why exactly is that happening? And I was literally like I was like looking into it and I was watching because I watched a bunch of Pocket of 12 videos and like that's how I do so much pixel coordinate stuff. And a lot of me trying to understand why that pixel like difference, like a lot of like these like smaller things, this is mainly me like tinkering around. And one of the things that I think is really, really interesting when we're doing TouchDesigner tutorials, right? Like if you've ever done a TouchDesigner tutorial, you've probably made something like this, right? A UV, like a grid, right? And then using this grid, right? You're like, you are essentially making this grid, right? And then you instance it with a bunch of cubes or a bunch of circles or a bunch of boxes, right? But when you recall doing that, right? Something that is always so, I think, like kind of taken granted for is the fact that every single box that you instance is perfectly centered. It's always in the center of that location. And when you change the scale of what you're instancing, they will stay centered, right? There's no like they will kind of shrink into the middle. And like everything is like nicely evenly distributed when you have like a simple like instance of grids of like squares on a grid. And the reason why there is this difference between like this manually created version versus this UV ramp version, and a bigger reason on why is a ramp not, when you think about a ramp, right? When you've ever placed down a ramp, have you ever like asked yourself, why is it not from 0 to 1 exactly, right? Like, why is it, right? To me, that was always confusing. I always saw videos of like, oh, the ramp isn't an actual ramp. And so when I found like this ramp sample, like the ramp chop, I was like, oh, this is cool. This is cool because it is from 0 to whatever end point, right? It's from 0 to 1, 0 from whatever, right? Because I have 34 samples, this should be the 34th index. When I divide everything by 34, it should give me like from 0 to 1. But when I'm making an actual ramp, it's never actually from 0 to 1. There's always like a little bit extra, right? 0.014. And so when I go back to the actual math of this all, what's happening here? Like what is actually happening when I'm actually doing this math? What I'm doing, right, is if I have 35, right? Whoop. If I have 35 in the x direction, right, from 0 to 35, and I divide everything by 35, right? When I'm adding half of 35 to all of the pixels, what am I doing? I am pushing the pixels. I am pushing the pixel values to be in the center. And I think that is like one of the things that like we don't really realize is that pixel data is centered. It's not from 0 to 1, right? It's from get to here. Oh, whoa. What the hell? The hell? Why is it like that? Huh. Okay. Not important. But essentially, like this guy right here is letting me divide everything and put everything into the center essentially. Like without it, if I remove both of these, all of these pixels are lying on the boundary, right? The center, right? Not the center, the border, right? They're not, all of these pixels are not centered. UV texture coordinates, UV data has to be centered. A top ramp does not go from 0 to 1 because it's going from 0 to 1, but they're treating the pixels as like locations. It's first subdividing the grid and then being like, okay, it's first like a ramp. What it's doing is if I'm having like 35 from 0 to 1, it's first subdividing that 35, like that 0 to 1 into 35 parts, and then it's pushing the the pixel location into the center. It's pushing into half of the pixel width and then half up the pixel height. And that's what like kind of creates this like um this this UV map that perfectly basically remaps essentially. Yeah. And I don't know, I thought that was really, really cool because I don't know, I never really thought about that. Like I never thought that like, oh, like when we're dealing with pixel coordinates, we need to make sure that like because they're pixels, right? Because they're squares, we need to make sure that they're in the dead center of every single pixel. Like we need to be able to kind of like conceptually figure out what that location is. We're not starting from here. We're starting from here. We're starting from here. We're starting from here. We're starting from here. When I created this little texture index down here, the whole point was like to kind of understand everything in terms of like actual absolute numbers. Like so. But when I tried to divide everything down, the reason why it didn't work was because these absolute numbers are starting from the bottom corner. It's starting from like down here rather than here. And I don't know. I thought that was very, very interesting. And so now that I have this, right? I think this really, yeah. So a grid pop does that automatically for you, which is also why you don't need to really like you don't really need to think about this sort of stuff because TouchDesigner does it for you. But I really wanted to understand why. And another reason why it's really nice to understand is because they're like, now that you have a correct mapping, well, now you can play around with understanding how a remap works better. So if I were to, for example, grab a rectangle, right? And I'm just gonna put this rectangle here. What's happening here is I'm putting a rectangle down, right? Like this. And I'm putting it over my UV map. You can't really see it, but there's a rectangle here. And all the pixel values here are 1. And so my UV map now looks like this. And so now when I do my remap, right? I now have like a rectangle that's like this one very specific color that's over it, right? And that value, the value of this rectangle, like the color value, is going to be the color of these two values here, this one and this one of this fill color. And if you look here, right, all of these are the same. Well, if this is 1, 1, then this value should be the exact same value as the 1, 1 position of my actual sponge, which is right here. So 0.52745, 0.59216. And so right here, I think it should be, yeah, or is it this one? Wait, let me change this actual value. Let's do something like here. Like, yeah, like 20 and 6. So yeah. So now we have 20 and 6, which is 0.563, 0.228235. And so this one right here is 20 and 6. Let's look at 20 and 6. Yeah, and there you go, right? There's, huh? Wait, is that the right one? Oh, wait, no, maybe it's not. 20 and 6. Oh, is it because I am moving it up? 0.3914. Oh, because I have an interpolation on? Oh, huh. Where did I put this? Wait, let me see. 0.39216. This is 21 and 7. Where's 21 and 7? 0.5, 0.4822, 0.2874. Oh, wait, why is this different? Oh, is it one down? 0.24. Oh, interesting. Wait, sorry guys. Why is this different? Hmm. Let me bring this down real quick. Hmm. Give me 1 second. Left, bottom, 1, 1. Okay, we do that. These are 0.41. Oh, wait, yeah, okay, yeah. So, yeah, okay, so 0.4159, and then this is, oh, okay, yeah, sorry. Because we are dividing by, okay, so that means that this should be, so 1, 1. If we do 0, 0, also does 1. Okay, and then if we do 2, 2, 5, 5, 0.527, sorry, 5, 1. Interesting. Forward, wait, 5, 0? That's so odd. Wait, do I have? Maybe? Okay, wait, let me do another thing real quick then. Before we even do something like that. Oh, that's why. Lol. That's funny. I forgot to undo my... Oh my god, that's so stupid. Guys, sorry. I forgot to undo my division. Or sorry, my push, my literal thing that I was talking about, which was pushing everything back into the centers. Oh my god. There we go. And then, yeah. Yes, there will be. There we go. Okay, yeah, I literally forgot to... Sorry, guys. Oh my god. Yeah, that's why. We forgot to push things back into the center of every single pixel location. So now if we get a rectangle, right, and we put it onto the center or wherever, right, this pixel value should map to, like, basically we can sample, like, this is how I really understood what remapping is. This is this is basically saying, right, like I have a square, right? I have a square that's a value of 12 by 8, right? Or sorry, 12x and then 12 red and 8 green, right? So that means that from this texture, right, we're looking, this entire area of that rectangle is like looking for that pixel position and then taking information from that pixel location. So if this is 12 by 8, right? Or 12 red, 8 green, and this entire thing is that color, then the remap is essentially being like, okay, let's look for that pixel location, which is somewhere around here. But essentially, yeah, 12 by 8, which is 12 by 8, yeah, here. And then it's dropping it onto that location. And yeah, essentially from there, right, you can learn a lot more about how pixels actually work. And so another thing that I like to kind of explain is if I were to just get rid of this and then move on to something called a transform, right? A transform can essentially move, you can change pixels, right, by pushing it back and forth, right? This basically translates it, right? But another thing that you can do, right, is another thing that, like, once I understood this, something else that really was cool to understand from being able to do this is, now that I know like what the unit of a pixel is, right, what I can actually do is, if I were to, let's copy these and not do that, right, and then do this. So what I can do is, now that basically this difference right here is like the exact unit distance between one pixel to another pixel. And so essentially, if I put a displace here, or if I put this value into this into a displace, I can change this displace to be from starting from 0. And then I can, let's just make this displace from the x-axis. What I can do is I can map this math here, like so. And I'm going to multiply this by -1. And then I'm going to change this extend to be 0. But because this value right here, the 0.014 and the 0.017, is basically the distance between one pixel to the next pixel, I can actually just multiply, like I can recreate the transform top with a displace by multiplying the amount of pixel distances that exist, right? So if this is at 1, that means that this displace is saying, okay, we're going to push 0.014 for this displace, and it's going to go like exactly 1 pixel over, essentially. Which, I don't know, I thought that was really cool, because I was like, wow, now I know so much more about pixel data just from literally being able to push things back and forth. And because this is like a texture, not only that, but like not only being able to displace, like being able to recreate a transform out of a displace, is that now I'm not only constrained to just like one translate parameter. I can create my own custom transform by multiplying these values of pixel like lengths to create my own transform using this like a displace, which I don't know, that's like so fascinating to me. And that's like how I make a lot of my art, actually, like just being able to push data around very specifically so that it knows exactly where to go next. And yeah, anyways, that's basically something that's like really, really cool about UV textures that I thought I wanted to share. And yeah, now if you want to generalize this, what you can really do is you can essentially make sure that all of your math is kind of like correct, like or like consistent from like one source material, right? This is 35 by 28, so I can make a pattern chop that's 35 by 28 down here, and like make sure that this is like, you know, like width up, and then this is height. So, and then what we can do as well is like making sure that these are also these guys are also the same. So like these would also have to make sure to be adapted, and then these ones would also have to be adapted. But essentially, like, yeah, the reason why I was digging into this so difficult, like so deeply, was because I was like, okay, how do I generalize this to make sure that I always know what is going on? And like once you're able to kind of break things down like this, I was like, okay, well now I can rebuild this with any sort of image, with any sort of texture. Yeah, which I don't know, that was cool. But yeah, that's basically the whole gist of like what I really wanted to talk about, which is textures and remapping. And I think now one last thing that I really wanted to say was like, or one other thing that I really wanted to go into was making sure that like to bring this into pops, right? Because I feel like a lot of people are wanting to try pops and trying to be able to like know how to actually texture something, or how to use certain pop, I guess, like um nodes. And so one of my like favorite ways to kind of demonstrate why being able to kind of make sure that like one of the biggest ways to like realize like how important texture coordinates are is by dropping like for it is by essentially learning how to texture something correctly in TouchDesigner, or at least for me, like a 2D thing. And one of the things that I think is like really, really important is like being able to understand how a lookup texture, whoopsies, lookup texture works here. And so I think a lot of people, I don't know, I've seen a few tutorials where I was like, oh, okay, yeah, we're going to use a lookup texture, but I still didn't really understand it. I think a really good way to sort of understand what's going on is if I were to grab a ramp like so, and I were to essentially make it so this guy is radial, and I'm just gonna do like 1/8. Oh, 1/8 period. Right? A lookup texture allows you to output any sort of attribute um, based off of some sort of texture. So I can just drop this into here, and then I can change this into uh, what's it called? Color. Oh, whoopsies. Sorry, not a rectangle. I meant to put down a grid. Like so. Yeah. So I think this is also a really interesting way to kind of like make it clear on like why texture coordinates are kind of important. And I'm just going to make it rotate. And so when we are talking about texture coordinates, what it's doing is basically the same thing as like a remap. It's grabbing information based off of this lookup index, this U and this V, and placing it onto the square, onto the grid. But there seems to be like there's already an issue with this, right? Which is that, oh, like this guy is not correct, right? And the reason being is the same reason why when we have like negative texture coordinates, um this remap kind of stops working unless we change it to extend mode, right? This extend mode is on 0. On the lookup texture, by default, it's on repeat. But if we turn these also on to 0, like so, you'll see that there's like immediately a kind of like a clear reason on why this is happening. If you look at this part that's actually being mapped, it matches exactly this bottom left coordinate here. Sorry, this bottom left quadrant here. And because essentially what it's doing is it's taking the P0 and the P1 and treating that as its lookup index. So what's happening is because of these positions down here are negative, it's basically being like, okay, well, let's look into the negative areas of this texture to find that thing that we need to map to. But the thing is that that just simply doesn't exist. And so there are a few solutions to fixing this. And like one of the biggest ways is, okay, well, why don't we just move this into the same range as our texture coordinates? So if we just translate, so this right here is from 0 to 1. Sorry, this is from negative 0.5 to 0.5, right? So this is, sorry, yeah, negative 0.5 to 0.5. So this is 0 to 0.5. If I were to translate this upwards, now I get a nice mapping, which is exactly like the same thing. But then there's like this one other issue that kind of comes along, which is you end up having to kind of adhere to this position. If I were to increase the scale, now it's still an issue. Like there's things that's not filling up anymore. If I were to, for example, also, if I were to rotate this, like here, up, up. Now the mapping is also, it's getting clipped, right? It's not actually, we're not actually like kind of like wrapping the geometry over this texture. We're kind of just slapping this image on top of this location and then just calling it a day. And so luckily in Pops, you don't have to do any of this dumb, like not dumb, but like super nerdy, like deep dive into why something works. Pops just gives you the ability to do this simply by, if you see here, it creates a point, it creates a normal, and it also creates a texture. And this texture stands for texture coordinates. So what we can do instead is we can use our texture coordinates as our lookup attribute. And now it goes from being kind of just like slapped on to actually being perspective correct. And a better way to explain this or to demonstrate this is by now I'm able to kind of, yeah, exactly. No, it's literally just like a green screen. But because if you use your texture coordinates, now you can easily like transform your geometry at any point of your workflow rather than maybe like afterwards, essentially. But yeah, and I think that that is something that like is not very intuitive to someone who's using a lookup attribute pop. And this thing is like really, really helpful. Like to be able to understand that, you know, you have different ways of applying data onto whatever you're using is, I think, such a like powerful tool. And to me, at least, now imagine this as being something like that's not like, imagine this as like driving something other than color, right? For example, if I were to grab like a rectangle, and I were to grab a copy like so, and I were to just drop these down to oh no, I'm gonna make these bigger, and then like this guy, yeah, okay, this guy, let's bring this down actually to 20 by 20. Okay, so now if I just have a bunch of these guys like so, I can copy over the color. Like that's cool. but I can also copy over a bunch of other stuff. I could use this lookup texture to drive like a point scale, right? And then, wait, what is it? Yeah, that's fine. And then instead of doing that, I can turn this on, and I can now now I can use uh I can use this data, right? This very clear image that like to me, like I don't know, that this very clear image that visually represents like information like point scale, right? Rather than just some like arbitrary like list of numbers, right? We can kind of make this like workflow work in our favor because we're not looking at lists anymore. We're looking at like an image. And it's very like I don't know, very interesting to me that like being able to kind of like figure this out. Now there are a few things that are really important when it comes to making like this lookup texture also work the same. And I don't understand why, and maybe someone can kind of like teach me how this like why this is a thing. But like if you look into this, right, there's something that's still kind of off, right? If we take a look at this image right here, right, you see that it's still not one to one. There's like this kind of like extra border that's kind of going on, right? And the reason why is because we also need a pixel centered sampling location. Just like how we needed to center our index like data here, right? We also need to center this lookup, but I don't understand why this is not on by default. Like I genuinely don't understand why. Like I don't understand why someone would want this thing off, basically. And yeah, I'm very like baffled on like why that's like a thing. But another thing is like if you also might want to turn off interpolation, but actually I don't think that matters that much. But yeah, and I think that's like something that's like really cool about pops. I think pops to me, I really like it now. I remember when they first came out 2 years ago, I didn't like them at all because a lot of pops, and it still is, right? It still is a lot of pops, is going into a DAT, right? Like changing your pop into a DAT like this, and then like kind of like reading stuff from a list, right? And I didn't like that. I really didn't like that at all. Um, I'll still do it now because I'm doing more things in pops. But being able to kind of understand that this lookup texture can help communicate ideas through images so that it transforms this workflow that is a lot of list reading into less list reading and more looking into images and how it kind of reflects there. I think that that's really awesome. And yeah, it's and again, right, like this is um like all we have to do is turn on this thing and it works. Like or turn on these things and use this. And yeah, if I show you what happens when this is what happens when we use P0 and P1. It I don't know, that this is wrong. I think if we repeat it. Yeah, if we repeat it, then we get something. But this is still not correct. But I mean, it's so cool. I don't know. Yeah, might as well node everything on the node program. And yeah, that's why I really like this guy. This thing, I think it's really interesting simply because of that. And then here's my last little thing that I think is really fun. But if we go back into let me see. Yeah, so that and yeah, another reason why I want to talk about this is because text coordinates kind of go in so many different ways, right? So this is one way, which is like remapping a 2D image. Another way is to control instances of geometry. Another way, and this last way, is let's say we have a rectangle. No, sorry, not a rectangle. Let's say we have a rectangle pop, right? And then we are literally going to just render this out, make it orthographic, and I'm gonna give it a constant, what's it? A constant material. And this is how I made my little shell reel at the beginning. Up, 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 up. There we go. Okay. Can you wait? Yeah, you can like. No, so you can do a circle as well. Just like that. But you might want to divide by 2 because because circles are 2 times the radius. Hexagons also work. Anything works. You can literally, I can just, I don't know. Let me just like merge this into something. Wow. Look at that. Spiky. But as long as like, yeah, like as long as you are able to like you can choose anything to drive this as long as you have the texture coordinates set up. Now like the way that these things need to be correct is the aspect ratio of the texture coordinates and the image need to be the same. So this is 20 by 20. This is also 1 by 1, 256 by 256. If I were to change this ramp's resolution to be like, I don't know, like something like this, 100, now we get something like weird because it's now it's not the right resolution. But we can fix that. Like if I change this to be like, I don't know, like 1920 by 1080, right? This messes it up. But if I change this grid to be representative of that, so let's just do 16 by 9, right? And we also need this to be 16 by 9. Then we get that same like I guess like adherence. And maybe the images are not, maybe point scale is not the best way to represent it, but yeah. Oh my god, no, okay, this is I don't like instancing at all. I don't think I've ever really loved it in the sense of like how messy it gets. Copy pop is great for replacing all aspects of instancing, in my opinion. I know that I think it's a bit laggier, but again, I'm not too concerned about that. I don't do anything in real time. And yeah, I think instancing probably helps still a lot for a lot of workflows, but I don't know. I really like the way that this is so much smoother. And yeah. Oh, and then what was I gonna go? Oh yeah, the last thing. The last thing is I wanted to talk about yeah, I wanted to talk about 3D or texture arrays. Yeah, this is the last thing I wanted to talk about. Which is, okay, I'm gonna grab these guys right here. This is a fun way. Dog Lady she also shared a way to do it. I really like this way. So I have these guys. I have a layout. I don't want to do anything codey, so I always didn't like the way that 2D texture arrays and 3D texture arrays were created in TouchDesigner, and so I didn't really go into them that often until I got into pops. And so one thing that you can do is if you have a layout, you can actually build this out yourself with just nodes. And yeah, you can kind of bottom to top, and then you can scale it like so. And now we have basically a texture array. But this isn't a 3D texture. This isn't a texture array. This is still just the texture. So what we need to do is we can bring this into and then we can go into this guy, which is position RGB. And then we can get a dimension. And a dimension is cool because again, you can rearrange the dimensions. So we know that all of these are 100 by 100. So we have 100 by 100, and we have 4 of them, like so. And now we can bring this back into an image, and we can use pop dimension. And now we have a 3D texture, just like that. Okay, yeah, exactly. So what is the difference between a texture and a texture array? So the difference is that like I said, right, a texture by itself ranges from zero to one, right? And a texture itself, all of these, they have no blue value, right? We're technically kind of like not using an extra channel, right? We have this 1/3 dimension, and so an array, like this is also a collection of textures technically, but there is something that is like fundamentally off about this, which is this is still ranged from 0 to 1. So that means that this goes from 0 to 1, but then this way goes from 0 to 1. And this might come as an issue because ideally, if you have this texture array, what you want actually is you want this to be 0 to 1. You want this to also be 0 to 1. You also want this to be 0 to 1, right? And so how do we do that? Like, how do we make sure that these little grids, right? These little subjects right here are still 0 to 1. Well, we have to fit it into a texture array, either a 3D texture or a 2D texture. For most remapping cases, a 2D texture is fine, but I will go into I'll create a ramp. I'll create another UV. And then we reorder all of these, make this to be 32-bit float RG. Oh no, this time we need it to be 32-bit float RGBA because we're going to use the blue channel. And then we do that. And then I will set this to be 0. And then we go here. And I go here. And then I think, let's see, what did we have to do here? I think it's, let me just make sure. Yeah, the depth source. There we go. Okay, yeah, so the depth source is input 2. So now we're utilizing that that fourth channel right there. And sorry, the third channel, which is the depth. And so right now it's at 0. Right now it's at, and yeah, no, that's exactly what's happening, right? Now we've figured out a way to be like, okay, we still have something that's from 0 to 1 that's going to basically drag out this first index of our image. And the way that we get our next one is we just need to translate our blue channel. And let me just show this off. So all we have to do is we just have to go past a certain amount, like so. And we go to the next one. And then we can go to the next one. And then we can go to the next one. And there we go. The thing is that this still has to be from 0 to 1, but now we're just utilizing like a third layer of depth. And for 2D textures, it doesn't really matter that much about how much you need to divide it by to get that certain index. Because there's 4, we can simply just do 1 divided by 4. Then we can do 2 divided by 4, 3 divided by... Oh, yeah, no, it does matter. So now we're at 3 divided by 4, but then we didn't go to our... we skipped 1, right? And then 4 divided by 4 gets there. So what's happening here, right? 1 divided by 4 gives me this one. 2 divided by 4 completely skips this one, right? And so it falls into the same idea where you need to center your z-axis as well. So you actually need to, no matter which value you're at. So 2 divided by 4 should go to this one, right? We need to center this by pushing it back a bit, like so. And now we got 2 divided by 4, 3 divided by 4, 4 divided by 4, 1 divided by 4. First one, second one, third one, fourth one. And yeah. And then last thing is, the reason why I said it doesn't matter too much is because 2D texture, so this is a 2D texture array. And 2D texture arrays are kind of like absolute. So it goes from 0, 1, 2, 3. But and you know, you saw that when I was doing the point transform. I will rotate it. Just give me a second. But you saw me do it like when I translate, right? These snap instantly. But with the 2D texture array, there's also a 3D texture array, which is a lot more information dense because you can actually include interpolation. So now we're interpolating between the slices. It's taking information between two slices. So if we do 1 divided by 4, wait, no, I think 2 divided by 4 minus 1 divided by 4, oh, 1 divided by 4 divided by 2, and then we divide that entire thing by a half, we should get a perfect middle blend between a colon 3. Yeah, there we go. We get a perfect middle blend between colon 3 and up. And yeah. And let's see what happens when we rotate it. Oh. Oh. Wow. Wait, let me change the pivot point. 0.5, 0.5. And then do. Wow. And something else that I really like about doing it this way is the way that texture arrays I saw were being made in TouchDesigner before was using like a cache and like a switch, but I don't think that allows for animation. So now because of that, like because of this way, it's pretty nice because you can just now you can animate your things. Yeah. And yeah. And so like, I don't know, this is like a pretty interesting way to manage your textures because now, I don't know, at least for me, now I have a way to perfectly lay things out and not use instancing. Like for my, like literally for me, like for this stupid little, no, okay, not stupid little showreel, but this entire showreel of like projects that I made, which is super laggy, by the way. It's literally just I didn't want to use a replicator. I was too lazy. But it's essentially just a layout of a bunch of my images. And I'm just instancing it all. It's a bunch of my videos. All just in a little layout. And I turned it into a 2D texture. A 41. But fat little guy. And yes, no, exactly. No, this is exactly Diogo, this is exactly what I'm saying. I like Pomp so much more because now I can do instancing without doing instancing completely. Like I think that this is the coolest part for me. I've figured out a way to kind of just forego instancing forever. I don't do it anymore. This is instancing with pops. And I think that this is like so, I don't know, awesome. Like, and it also something that's really great is that instancing doesn't have, okay, I don't know, for me at least, this does not really have this problem of making sure that two instance textures are the same length, right? Like I can just kind of go and like not try to figure like, yeah. So literally like, I don't know, try this out. It's great. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's all I really, oh my God, that's all I really wanted to show you guys. 3D textures are cool. Yo, hey, honestly, it does fine. It's doing 60 FPS for the most time, and then I turn on OBS and I was like, okay. But yeah. I think that's basically all I really want to talk about. And the last thing I think really is I'm talking about texture arrays in the form of remapping images. But I believe there's a lot more you can do with it, especially with 3D textures. I think that the fact that you can interpolate between different points is super cool. and I think that you can probably apply a lot of more complex, I guess like math in like 3D with the texture array that I have not explored yet that I want to. But yeah. Thank you so much for um yes. Yeah, so that's the only thing. If you figure out something that to fix that, that would be great. I just kind of use a fit. I kind of just do a little fit and then kind of call it a day. So every single one of my videos was just fitted to be 500 by 500. And then there's like a tacky way to do transparency stuff that if you're like if you're curious, like I can like help you out with that. But yeah. Um, Aside from that, thank you so much for listening to me talk about all of this stuff. I think that this is like one of my favorite things about TouchDesigner is pixel math and pixel data and being able to move things based off of just like yeah, like finding raw values. And I hope that this encourages you to kind of dig into the why and the how of like why like of TouchDesigner and like how different nodes can be the same and different and whatnot. Um, and yeah, if you guys are interested in more of this, I do have a feedback form. This is for my lectures, which are like kind of different than my workshops. I'm kind of treating this as like maybe like a practice for if I'm talking about more workshopy things, where I have to actually have to kind of teach and go along. Um, but yeah, if you would like, let me see. If you are interested in more TouchDesigner stuff, TouchDesigner workshops, I have a TD Rec page on my Instagram where I just shout out a lot of cool TouchDesigner tutorial makers. My channel, Discord channel, also has a lot of great information on resources. People are always out here helping. I don't know, super awesome. And then I'm probably gonna do another workshop for my bad apple that builds off of this concept. So I can leave a Luma link down. This one is not public yet. I'm not entirely sure if it's gonna be public, just because there was a lot of people last time. But if you are interested in signing up for that, it's going to be on Sunday, this Sunday, August 16th, same time. And yeah, we will I'll leave it in this workshop chat. And I'll pin it. But yeah, thank you so much for letting me yap. I really hope I can change this, like make this into a actual talk. I love talking. And wow, there's still 50 people here. That's crazy. Thanks so much for hanging out, guys. I Yeah, this one's paid, so it will be a little like workshop that people can take a little thing out. I will also in my feedback form that will come out later. Actually, let me just send that out right now as well if I can find it. Um, I'll send it later. That's fine. But yeah, I'm gonna stop recording.